Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg gave a masterclass performance in terms of navigating the hostile media landscape for Democrats when he had a heated exchange with CNBC host Joe Kernan about President Biden's record, specifically with regards to the border. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, friends, we got a couple of clips to play here. The first one between Secretary Buttigieg and Joe Kernan, who is a member of CNBC. He seems pretty conservative to me based on previous videos that I've seen of him, even though CNBC is nominally a mainstream media outlet. And Buttigieg, who is a gifted rhetorician and debater, just knocks it out of the park once again. This first clip is relatively long, and it's pretty heated between the secretary and Kernan. We're going to play it and unpack it together.
Well, you're right. When you look at the numbers across our economy, all-time highs in the stock market, record job creation, unemployment that hasn't been this low for this long since before I was born, you see so many good things happening that we want to tell the story for. And I'm one of those who definitely believes the president deserves more credit for those achievements. Part of how you do that is you got to go out there and take credit for those achievements. And I think you'll see the president in the State of the Union talking about what's been achieved. You're definitely going to see cabinet members like me continuing to go out across the country, pointing to the projects that are getting done, the Blatnick Bridge being redone in Minnesota, Wisconsin is just one example out of 40,000 that we're highlighting right now. But look, people are also frustrated, and I get it. People are generally frustrated with the negativity they see every time they see coverage of Washington. That's why Congress right now has an approval rating. Last time I checked was, I think, in the 20s. So we need to make sure that we highlight the things that are going right and continue to pay attention to the things that are going wrong and lay out the plan and make clear who's trying to get progress and who's trying to actually solve those problems versus just use them to score political points. I mean, it was especially disappointing to see what happened with the border, right? You got congressional GOP, talked about the border every chance they got. So you would think they would be interested in addressing it. And yet when a bipartisan bill put together by one of the most conservative members of the Senate and Democrats working, negotiating, making tough decisions that both of their respective bases were going to have trouble with, came and hammered that out. It looked like there was going to be a chance to do something real with real resources at the border, only for Donald Trump, who's not even an elected official, to come in and kill it with the chill that he put on congressional Republicans.
So this is where we're about to see an argument effectively break out between the secretary and Joe Kernan. But before we get into that, I just want to emphasize that, again, that right there was a masterclass performance in and of itself by Buttigieg, who's saying, listen, there is frustration here. There is a disconnect between the objective, factual accomplishments of the Biden administration and the Democratic Party writ large and people's perception. And we complain about it a lot here at Pondering Politics, which is why, as he said, you know, it's not just the president, although the president has probably by far the most individually important role. And hopefully we'll use the platform of the State of the Union to advertise his accomplishments and his aspirations, but also every single person in the president's cabinet. And also you and I, we have an obligation to do our part to connect the dots. OK, so that's what we do here. And I like the fact that he says, listen, we actually have to go out and take credit if credit is not going to be given. This is an attitude that, right or wrong, the Republican Party embodies. Donald Trump was a master at this, taking credit for things that he very often had nothing to do with or were accomplished in spite of him. So I love that we're going to start to see more aggressive posture from the Democrats on this. Now, here's where the argument takes place.
So, yeah, we can either solve problems or we can have them be political footballs.
So the whole move to try to come up with something by the administration and obviously bipartisan, that didn't come until it became clear it was going to be a major campaign issue. And only then did the Biden administration get interested in it. And every time I hear those talking... Hold on,
let's be clear here,
Let me finish first. But every time we hear those talking points that suddenly it was Republicans who ruined the border, that's why people get so frustrated. We know what President Biden said about inviting people in. We know that he got rid of all the things that were keeping the border closed that President Trump had put in. We know that he got rid of all those. So when you say it's not his fault,
that's literally not true. It's literally not true that he got rid of the message. It's true he got rid of family separation.
Did
I'll
you
give
see
that. He got rid of the
7.2
policy
million
to separate-
people come in
Look,
during the Trump administration? It was a trickle.
He got
at
rid of
that
the
point.
policy to tear children out of the arms of their parents. That's true. But it is not true. Some of the other things that have been suggested. Let's be clear. Bipartisan
part of
efforts
the
of border
problem with
reform
why there's a
have taken
disconnect,
place in
I think.
2015, 2006. I mean, literally since the Reagan administration, right? There have been bipartisan efforts to get something done here. But I really believe we've gotten to the point where many congressional Republicans find it so useful as a cudgel that they would rather keep the problem going for political uses than solve the problem and risk the chance that the president could share in the credit for that. In the same way that we see some of them, even though we had great bipartisan cooperation on the infrastructure bill that I work on, a lot of them who were against that, only to turn around and try to get credit for it when we actually have a ribbon cutting or a groundbreaking.
So right there, again, this is a long clip, so I am interrupting it with commentary. I know some of you don't like it, but you're going to have to get over it. The fact of the matter is this. Again, this is another masterclass performance. This is even better than the introduction because you can see how visibly agitated Joe Kernan is. He is interrupting and filibustering. Now, if he wants to make a point or ask a pointed question, that's perfectly fair. That's what a responsible journalist should do for any guest, including conservative Republican guests, which very often the mainstream media and certainly right-wing media never do. But then he won't give Secretary Buttigieg the opportunity to answer. They just keep talking over each other. And he even is relatively disrespectful to one of the most powerful people in the United States government, a cabinet official, and Buttigieg takes it in stride. But you can see where he's just like, where Joe Kernan is visibly agitated and huffing that Buttigieg is pushing back. So you can tell that he's not prepared for it. And also good on Buttigieg for also hitting Republicans hard on the double standard with respect to other Biden accomplishments. Set the border issue aside. With the bipartisan infrastructure bill, we've covered this in previous videos, how Republicans time and time again try to associate themselves with the accomplishments and the funding of the Biden administration, even though they not only voted against it, but actively whipped votes and campaigned against it in the first place. Good on Buttigieg for calling that out.
The reason that some of these numbers stay where they are is because it just seems like instead of actually owning some of the issues that we have, instead of acknowledging that the president maybe has lost a step, the administration keeps saying, "Don't believe your lying eyes," and that's why you're
respectfully,
at,
Joe.
that's why you're at 18%.
Respectfully, I think congressional Republicans are saying, "Don't believe your lying eyes," which is why they're polling at about 15% right now.
I know
Look,
that
right
Congress
now,
is never. Congress isn't running.
We have
for,
economic numbers.
for president.
Is it my lying eyes that under Joe Biden we've had the most job creation in American history? Is it my lying eyes telling us that unemployment and inflation are both below 4%? And have been that way for the longest time in who knows when? Is it reality or is it spin? To point out the fact that manufacturing jobs are up under this president and we're down under the last president. These are matters of simple fact.
When we heard for 3 years that the border's closed and it's secure, and Mayorkas said it's closed, and 7.2 million people have come into where our big cities have no idea how to handle this. And then you hear from the administration
here's the thing.
that it's not their
this
fault.
is really important. This is really important, okay? The common sense position, and the position that, by the way, a lot of moderate Democrats and moderate Republicans would always say, the kinds of things that you hear at the Chamber of Commerce in Indiana, where I come from, is that there ought to be more legal immigration and less illegal immigration. And yet when there's a chance to actually do that, that's not what happened. The last administration cut legal immigration. And meanwhile, our economy is pulling people just as much as terrible conditions in Latin America are pushing people. And when there's finally a bipartisan compromise that would help address at least some of those issues, congressional Republicans couldn't get it done because Donald Trump, who's not even in elected office, killed it. That is a...
So awesome, fantastic performance from Secretary Buttigieg, the whole thing. And again, you can just see how upset Joe Kernan is. You can even hear him laboriously breathing in rage while Buttigieg is talking. And the guy's not even on screen, but you can hear it over the mic. Caught it. So a couple of things. So again, Joe Kernan, like many other people regurgitating right-wing facts, or talking points rather, conflates these talking points with facts. So, he talks about it was down to a trickle. Illegal immigration was down to a trickle under Donald Trump during COVID because there was a global pandemic which was preventing these mass migrations. So if you want to give Donald Trump credit for that, then that means I get to blame everything bad about COVID on Donald Trump. But of course, Joe Kernan wouldn't accept that. So no, I'm not going to give him any credit for COVID era undocumented migration numbers. Not going to give him any credit for that whatsoever. In terms of Title 42 and Remain in Mexico, we've talked about this before. The Cato Institute, the right-wing Cato Institute, has put out studies indicating that those efforts had mixed results at best. And by the way, they were employed by the Biden administration. The Biden administration employed Title 42. It employed Remain in Mexico for a time, and we saw spurious results. So again, the facts are not with the Republicans on this. In terms of the politics, Buttigieg is just objectively correct. I want to play some of these to remind you. These are Republican elected officials admitting that the reason that this bipartisan border bill is not going to pass is specifically because of Donald Trump's politics.
I think the border is a very important issue for Donald Trump, and the fact that he would communicate to Republican senators and congresspeople that he doesn't want us to solve the border problem because he wants to blame Biden for it is really appalling.
I'm extremely disappointed in the very strange maneuvering by many on the right to torpedo a potential border reform bill. If we have a bill that, on net, significantly decreases illegal immigration, and we sabotage that, that is inconsistent with what we told our voters we would do. But it would be a pretty unacceptable dereliction of your duty.
I had a popular commentator 4 weeks ago that I talked to that told me flat out, if you try to move a bill that solves the border crisis during this presidential year, I will do whatever I can to destroy you.
But I would.
And so on and so forth. We could keep going, but it is simply a fact. The reason that this bipartisan border bill, which was relatively conservative, endorsed by the anti-Biden, pro-Trump Border Patrol Union, did not pass was literally 100% the fault of congressional Republicans. Biden gets no blame whatsoever, at least when it comes to the fact of the matter. And Joe Kernan can't contend with that, which is why he has no acceptable response. Last thing I'll say before I end this is, when he tries to hit the president, Buttigieg, with the president's low approval rating, Buttigieg hits back that Congress has an even lower approval rating, particularly congressional Republicans. And Kernan's response is, well, they're not running for president. Yeah, but they are running for election. The 2024 election, and perhaps Kernan's too stupid to understand this, isn't just the presidential election. There are congressional and Senate seats up for re-election as well. And if Republicans want to keep that House majority or expand their majority in the Senate, then they probably need to actually campaign on ideas and policy. And the fact that they tanked this bipartisan border bill purely for cynical politics to benefit their cult leader, that's not going to help. And again, that's 100% objectively the Republican Party's fault. Masterclass performance by Pete Buttigieg. Let me know what you think in the comments.